Italy to the countries of final settlement, as is Germany. We are 4 partners in this project. The University of Athens, who is the leader of the project, and the Society for Social Development in the Greek Society for Social Development, which is an NGO with vast experience on refugee issues, and Nikos Kourachanis is here to represent that society. The University of Urbino Carlo, and the Technical University of Kiel. This is our first multiplier event, and it comes to wrap up the first 2 intellectual outputs of our project. The first intellectual output of our project was a state-of-the-art review from our 3 participant countries that actually reviewed the conditions and the particularities of refugee education in each country. It addressed the main issues to be investigated, to be researched within the project. And it also reviewed the very recent literature on the issues of refugee education. The second intellectual output of our project, which is not completed yet, we're in the process of developing it, comes to identify the educational and training needs of refugee children and adolescents and teachers who teach in refugee settings. We know that this is a major problem for many European countries, that there are not enough studies to cater for the needs of the refugee population and the educational personnel that is occupied in refugee education. The third step of this project is to identify good practices out of the first 2 intellectual outputs and from the review of these policies, and together to develop a training program that would ensure that we have an adequately trained and properly informed educational personnel in order to ensure that we have a critical mass of educators to cater for the continuity of education of refugee children within European Union. Additional to these intellectual outputs, we are going soon to have a project website. It's not on yet because we have some bureaucratic issues with the University of Athens, and I think that we're going to solve them very soon. And we're going to have a project website which will include all the deliverables of the project, and would also serve as a forum for all of us to communicate, because I know that everyone here has an interest in refugee education, and we welcome your contributions, and we actually ask for your contributions to the matter. So I conclude by thanking again our hosts and thanking again our speakers who have volunteered to participate in this first multiplier event. And I hope that it will add to our thinking about refugee education and about the continuity of refugee education. And it will also contribute to the training of this critical mass of people towards addressing the issues of refugee education with greater rigor and greater respect for these people. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I will shortly introduce the first speakers of this first part of the session, the keynote. The Professor Maddalena Colombo from University of Sacro Cuore, Milano. She's an expert of migration in Italy, and she will give a speech in order to give an overview of the situation of the migratory dynamics, especially referring to the minors. So Maddalena, it's up to you. You can present. And shortly after, will speak Silvia Taviani from the Immerse Horizon 2020 project and from Save the Children, Italia. And she also will present the results of the project, and I guess also will give the position and the view of her organization about the issue that we are discussing today. So also thank you to Silvia. And then after you, there will be another part of our panel from Germany. They will present some experience from Germany. Maybe Chris, you can tell something more about that. And in the last part, we will host a very interesting experience from Greece that is based on an NGO that is working on professional training for migrants and refugees, especially in the field of coding. So in a very advanced technological field that will provide opportunity for work and social integration. So Chris, I don't know if you want to say something about our guests from Germany.
Yeah, of course. And first of all, yeah, good evening to everyone, and I would like to thank from from the representing the University of Applied Sciences, the Fachhochschule Kiel here in northern Germany. I would like to give out my warm regards here. Hopefully with some sun, but always sun with teeth, as we I think everybody say that. So that means a lot of cold. Yeah, my name is Christoforos. I'm a project coordinator assistant representing the University of Applied Sciences here for this for the whole 2-day seminar, and our project coordinator, Professor Yiannis, will join us today at the time of the slot of the session where we present our case study from Germany. And so I could roughly say 3 or 4 lines regarding the 2 keynote speakers that I have prepared for today's session. Our first keynote speaker, they will do a joint presentation, but yeah, let me we have 2 speakers, as you can see on the program, Mrs. Tatiana Bugachuk and Professor Pollat. So I could present roughly now the speakers, right? Just give a hint side of what they're, so Mrs. Pardon my stress a bit. So yeah, Mrs. Bugachuk has completed her teaching degree in German and English, German and Romanistic and Roman languages at the University of Göttingen, and she's lately she has been professionally engaged as a intercultural educational counseling. So as a counselor of education for the city of Kiel, so a more administrative representative. And since 2015, she's employed on a Berufsschule, let's say like a technical or vocational training school with mixed classes and so on, where they support young adults, also refugees, who will be graduating with their middle school diploma in 2 years' time, and with their connections after school. So she will function as a administrative, let's say, counselor representative of the city of Kiel, of the federal states of Schleswig-Holstein, of northern Germany. And she will present some practical, I mean, along with the theoretical input, some practical case studies from the work that they do in this vocational training school in Kiel, which is the Hauptcity of this federal state that we're presenting in this project, the Schleswig-Holstein. And Professor Pollat, the second speaker within this slot, she was also based at the University of Kiel, but will start on the next semester at another university in Osnabrück at the Faculty of Economics and Social Sciences. Her professorship is on social work in the context of social diversity. So a strong focus on intercultural pedagogy, social sciences, and so on. And she has a multiple role as well. So working as an integration officer for the city of Kiel, but also Oldenburg, and with a focus on diversity conscious. I hope the translation in English is also okay for diversity conscious or diversity work, and racism critical social work. So intersectionality and social inequalities. So they will present, let's say, 2 in 1, like a slot with a theoretical input and a practical input to see some practical examples from the city of Kiel, and which is only one example from this, federal state of Schleswig-Holstein that we represent in this project. That will be around 4, if I'm not mistaken. So more or less, yeah. So
Maddalena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I thank you all for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to to give you some short little contribution to your project. I really do not much about your project, but what I listened from Yiannis before is totally in line with my thinking, and the issues raised by Yiannis are really relevant also for me, to me. For example, the lack of continuity in the education for refugees. I agree with this point, and also the lack of a critical mass of educators, of teachers sensitive to refugees and unaccompanied minors. It's a relevant point in Italy too. And what I just want to present from my side, I try to share the video. Tell me if it's working or not. Can you see?
Yes,
the slide, the cover?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I refer mainly to a book that a couple of years ago, together with a colleague from University of Bari, Fausta Scardino, we published in Italian. Sorry, so I tried just to draw from this book some general ideas and to share with you. Maybe they are useful for your work. We used this title for the book, The Education for Refugees and Unaccompanied Minors is a Needed Reality. So it's a reality because it's something just into place, just put into place. But we need more. No, there is a sort of will beyond this book. We will to foster more education for refugees and unaccompanied minors. This book was the result of a conference, precisely the middle-term conference held in Catania, middle term of ESA, European Sociological Association. And it collects 9 studies, 9 mostly empirical studies, on these topics: education policies for migrants, adults as social actors of migration, and minors as social actors of migration. It's correct to distinguish, not in the practice, but at a theoretical level, what is education for adults and what is education for minors, for young people. The point, the red line that collects all the studies is the idea that the cultural capital of the migrant person is a fundamental source of citizenship. Without cultural capital, the citizenship is at risk of weakness and of being exactly a set of rights. Another point linking the 9 essays is the fact that if we think about where the education for refugees and accompanied minors is carried out, we can identify a risk of educational segregation. Because, for example, in Italy, we have the evening courses, the CPIA. The Italian audience can well imagine these ones, where takes place the so-called adult education, but they are not adult. They can also be minors. Minors that are not able to follow, to attend a daily course. And even in a vocational training center or in a special course into the university, and even more if these courses are held in prison, the main risk is to reinforce the tendency at the educational segregation. This must be kept well in mind. The issues at stake we dealt with during all along the book are the difficulties, the conditions in which it's possible to achieve good results. So the completion, for example, of the courses, the acquisition of a study certificate, the transition from school to work, and so on. Another point is to identify the reactions that come from the school actors where they have to deal with refugees and accompanied minors as students. So I refer to what occurs into teachers, principals, and other students groups. Because we are thinking about an education not segregated, not separated, a common education. And this is the point. A common education is really difficult. Last point has been how to identify indicators of effectiveness of these policies, of this educational policy. When an educational policy for refugees and accompanied minors is effective, is positive, so we can apply and transfer from a context to another. generally speaking, so sociologically speaking, human capital for displaced people is many things, has many meanings. For example, it's a lever for their success in migration. It's also a way for boosting their capability, skills, knowledge, interests, preferences, and also languages, ability in self-expression. All the transversal competencies, the citizenship competencies listed by the European Union as necessary for making citizens people living in Europe. The last meaning I want to point out is that human capital, if we think to refugees and accompanied minors as gifted by a human capital, we are able to overcome the victimization, of these people. If they are gifted by their human capital, they have also a pair status, and they can, if they want, of course, communicate and live and contribute to the host society. So what they bring into the host society, they bring resources, no? A luggage. The luggage means something that is useful also for host society. Innovation, global thinking, the so-called diversity advantage. There is a sort of rhetoric about diversity as a resource. Yes, it's a resource, but what is exactly the advantage they bring into the host society? This is the way, to me, for thinking correctly to this point. We outline also in the book that education is both a right and a duty at the same time. A right for each person, and a duty for the state, for the community. Think, for example, to the community that is also gifted by a culture. Culture is a common good and must be equally distributed. If there are people so marginalized, so excluded that they cannot share nothing in cultural terms, that means the community and the state have a weak identity, a poor identity. And so differently for newcomers and for second generation, of course, what we point out is that it's needed to avoid educational waste. Educational waste means, for example, do not consider that people coming into Europe are not all illiterate. They have a cultural background, maybe not high as they are expected to have, but they have a cultural background, whatever that means. And we have the right and the duty to exploit this and explore, of course, also this cultural background. Another point is to make it concrete, the right and duty of education, to prevent the school dropout of these people. And this is also a widespread point, a widespread phenomenon. that refugees and unaccompanied minors are often precarious in their life. And so often they give up to attend a course. And this is a loss for everybody. As Yiannis introduced minutes ago, yes, education for refugees is a new field of investigation. And it's also a slippery object because it is carried out often outside from the formal education system. So it's hard to collect the quantitative data or qualitative data. And this is exactly what we tried to do, what we support, that a group of researchers in Italy were requested to do. Go in depth in some processes occurring when the students are refugees or unaccompanied minors. For example, the lights and shadows of the diversity management in the classroom. For example, the building of new inequalities in the classroom or reducing inequalities. For example, as young, the more the younger are the students, the easier is to reduce inequalities during the living classroom, I mean. Another point of attention should be the stereotypization and the discrimination of refugees in access of education, but also during the educational activities. We tend to reproduce as long as possible our categories where when we enter the relationship with refugees or unaccompanied minors. Another point of difficulty is also the recognition of academic qualification, the previous school and cultural background. All these processes that I listed here, maybe you can profit of this list. I hope the list covers all these concerns we have to have facing the planning, for example, planning an education for refugees. The book is full of results of empirical research, so field research, that highlights, for example, what are the most stressful situation for teachers. I refer, for example, at the brown one here in the slide. That many teachers learn day by day that the students, the unaccompanied minors, are often minors only for the law, because they are not minors. They are really adults. They have on their shoulders a lot of life, and often they have negative experiences on their shoulders to be elaborated, to be acknowledged, and so on. And so it's hard to find out the right way to stay in connection with them. They, for example, they don't want to be treated as children. They want to be treated as adults. But they are also maybe in lack of personal relationships, for example, lack of affection with somebody because they are isolated, they are alone, they feel to be not accepted, and so on. And so it's a delicate mix of distance and difference and indifference to their situation. Another point of stress for teachers is to adapt the educational times, the educational programs to the life, to the real life of these people. This is a weak point, a weakness point for many teachers in Italy, and not only in relationship with migrant students, but many teachers are not able to personalize, to customize the program, not only to the class, but also to the single person. And this will be a problem. The patterns that we observed into the diverse educational settings are of two kinds. Here you can see now the scheme. Schools and vocational centers and universities also can act in a bureaucratic way or in a creative and customized way. Both are necessary because they are also institutions, they are also organizations. So the bureaucratic side is necessary for enhancing technical skills and reinforcing the school authority. This is really important. If not, the risk is that I mentioned before. So the disconnection, the acknowledgement of the authority of the school and of the teacher. So it's good to have standards, procedures, and applying rewards and penalties, because this side of the schools, it's the universalistic and the effective side of an educational institution, but they cannot be only bureaucratic. So the second way to enact education and inclusion is to put into practice some creative and customized solutions. For example, since the very starting points, the welcoming of displaced people, in some in given situation, one can unrestrict the rules. One can make inclusion possible, asking, for example, support from the outside. It is also possible to valorize the exceptional of its students, find out what is hidden beside and beyond each student. What we want to avoid is, of course, the two extremes, the welfarism. So people waiting for help and support, they are passive in front of the educational offering. And this is not good for the success of the education. And also we want to avoid the racialism. So the referring to the bureaucratic rules to exclude someone. And this is also common in our schools. I just want to go towards my conclusion. Of course, you know very well the super diversity concept, And if we and you work into an education setting, you do know very well what it means, what is it super diversity in a classroom. Having a mixed group in a classroom means also becoming more sensitive to the diversity, being concrete, not only between the natives and the immigrants, but also within each groups. And this can make crazy the teacher, the educator. And so it's good to say we have to prepare a new class, a new group of educators sensitive to the super diversity management, not the diversity management, the super diversity management. When also the differences in gender, differences in age, this is one other challenge in a classroom, differences in age, differences in religion or position towards religion, for example, no? The more secularized and the more believer, the more traditionally believers. All these features of the people makes the difference in a classroom and in an educational program. I want to stop to conclude about this kind of interrogation, if we are educators or planners of education. How super diversity in education can become not a loss, but an advantage. If we have only lack of preparation among teachers or educators, if we have routinization of teaching practice, segregation into the group of similars, isolation within or from a single establishment, super diversity becomes a loss. But if we have the creativity, just to say, the creativity or the opportunity to become intermediators, not only of a school integration, but of a social integration in a wider sense, we can transform it in an advantage. I thank you very much for the attention. I just stay with you for until 4 o'clock. Sorry, I must go then. And so maybe if there are some questions, I'm glad to answer immediately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Colombo, for your presentation. And now follows Silvia Taviani, that will give us an overview of the project Immerse and from Save the Children, and so from the field, from what's happening in the migration field, for especially looking to young people and children. Thank you, Silvia. You can present.
Thank you, Professor Sergi. Thank you, everybody, for giving me this opportunity. I would like to personally thank you, Professor Colombo, for this great speech before me. It's very hard to continue now, but I would like to say that, yes, of course, I'm here from Save the Children Italy. I'm the project coordinator of this big Horizon 2020 project for the field of Italy, of course. And I would like to present, of course, some challenges and also problems that has Save the Children, so an NGO present in the field, has to highlight and to present here for the Continugee project. First of all, let me say that Immerse project actually it's a sorry, I can't try to. Okay, IMMERS project is about the integration of social education integration about all minors with with a migrant background. So also refugee children, also unaccompanied minors, but also the new generation and the new arrivals. So the aim of the project is very complex. We have Professor Colombo said there is a lack of data about the inclusion and integration all over the Europe and also in Italy. So the big objective and the main objective of this project, as I can present now, is first of all to define new research methods and tools in order to collect really reliable data about the immigrant and inclusion. Also in the educational sector, but also in non-formal sector, because we know that the integration, we can say the integration process not only at school, but also in the field of the community. So the IMMERS project for us, of course, of the children, we do a lot of research now, but we have the aim to improving the voice of children also in the researchers. So we are very glad to participate in this big project, because also it's a project that would like to hear the voice of children and also the family and the community. And at the end, we would like to present policy and recommendation to the European and national institutions. Just to see, to show some words about the project is implemented in 6 countries. Most of all are represented here, so Italy, Germany, and Greece, but also Spain, Ireland, and Belgium. We are trying to, in 4 years and a half, so a big time for doing the research. We would like to focus on 3 point of view: the well-being, the gender, and also for Italy and Spain, the interculturalism and multilingualism. As you can see here, I would like to use the IMMERS project to give to the Continugee project some light that could be interesting. And but of course, the first one is a tool, because also IMMERS project realized a sort of social media. The IMMERS Hub is another platform that I invited you to join, just to share, first of all, tools for the educational sectors, for teachers, but also researchers, from researchers, of course, and also policy paper for policymakers. So it's a huge platform that we are very glad to present here, just to with the important aim to involving the educational community. Now with the pandemic, we know how it is important to speak each other, also overall the Europe and also on internet. So this is an important tool. I think that it would be interesting to share with you. Just to give some data, but I know that Professor Colombo said before me, just to underline, because of course, IMMERS projects are focused on also new, we say now the second generation, the new generation of migrant minors. So just to say to my colleagues from the other countries, some data about the context, because the Italian framework has this kind of big picture that 1 minor on 10 in Italy has not the Italian citizenship, and just this data is very important to underline. And also in the formal school, in the educational background, also the students of migrant children are the 10% of all the student population. So it's a huge important part of it. And also the dropout that Professor Colombo said is 14% in Italy, so it's very a huge problem. And we know that there is the double for migrant students, so that's the starting point. Just here some points, some topics that I can follow. The framework now it's changed, no? As we know, and so now we try to underline that there is a sort of in Italy an homogeneity of rules also produced by local authority and also regional authority, because we know that in Italy there is a sort of regional discrimination also about children sometimes. We also can highlight that there is a difficult coordination in the intervention between the same institution and also with the social, the private bodies. And also there is a consequent fragmentation of approach. This is a point that is very important to highlight, also because we know, also because as Save the Children, we lead our package that has the aim to collect best practice, good practices, no? Like your project about the integration and inclusion, but this virtuous practices sometimes is not homogeneous across the Italy and depends a lot of also of a lack of funds. Another thing about Italian framework that I already heard, but I would like to underline too, it's about the early school leaving of the migrant children. That is a good problem. And also, as Professor Colombo said, about the unaccompanied minor, we have the problem, the challenge, first of all, of the CPIA, so the center, the access in the center for adults, but also the lack of data about unaccompanied minors, also in the access of this kind of center for educational centers, and also if the children promote and is very happy for the improvement of the Zampa law in 2017, we know that now the implementation of this law is very hard. So we need a new effort for the protection of unaccompanied minors in Italy, of course. And some few words about the COVID-19, because we observe from our field all over in Italy, of course, also in international point of view of Save the Children, but also in Italy, that the pandemic situation increased the poverty, the educational, but also the economic poverty, of course, the digital poverty, as we say, because the access to digital skills and digital citizenship, we can say, is very hard for children, of course, of migrant background. We observe a phenomenon like learning loss and educational poverty, dropout estate they live. Here, just some highlight about the project, because I think they are interesting. The effort to immerse project for the first 2 years, 2019, 2020, and now from 2021, we are starting to collecting data in schools and educational centers, is trying to co-create and validate a dashboard of indicators. So a new experimentation of set of indicators that will can help to collect reliable data about the integration, and also to look at this phenomenon that is very complex in another point of view, we can say. So we tried, thanks to this new dashboard, to unify criteria in the collection of data. And as you can say, we co-create this kind of dashboard. So we go, thanks to qualitative research, to hear the voice from children, families. We hear the voice also from teachers, principals, educators, from the non-formal sectors, but also institutions at local, national, EU level. So we did this kind of effort. And now I can present here just some highlights about the dashboard. Thanks to this infographic, we can say that regarding the determinants, we have some area, we can say. So the 5 dimensions of the outcomes, so the result of this kind of of phenomenon is this area very important. So the access to right, the language and culture, the educational achievement, connectedness, and well-being. And regarding the determinants, we identify these kind of barriers. So the school segregation, as Professor Colombo of course said, but also learning support, mental health, so important is this kind of period, negative attitude, that also the political framework now are increasing, school organization, teachers, and political and leadership. Just to give you, these are the specific indicators. I can have the time to go in depth, but I can leave the presentation, of course, and in the website there are all the paper on the research to go more in depth. But just to give you some light about the first results from the qualitative and the first empirical observation. Starting from the political leadership, we say that now we observe in the framework of Italy a fragmentation of policies and services, a big, huge bureaucracy that obstacle the access to rights, and also the problem of access to citizenship for the new generation of minors with background of immigrants, but they are born in Italy, raised in Italy, so there is the first problem. We also can present to you that about the school organization and teacher, that is the topic today of our conversation, and it could be interesting to say school teachers and principals say them also that there is a lack of training. There are a lot of limited implementation intercultural approach in the sense of systematic implementation, because we have a lot of good practices in Italy, but not probably so much systematized. And we have also the need to standardize this kind of services, enhance the creativity of local practices, strengthen networks between also the private sectors, of course, but also the ONG, all the educators that are also outside the school. Regarding the negative attitudes, we can underline that in this period too, we observe a lot of incidents of political cultural climate, experience and perception of negative attitude that we can say, of course, because there is a lot of discrimination and a lot of hate speech so common in school, but also out of schools. Regarding the mental health, we also observe the lack of counseling services in school in Italy, but I know that is very common. There is the trend of school segregation, the problem that Professor Colombo said, and about the learning support, because the language, of course, is the first barrier that children face, is the discrepancy between territory in offering learning support also at school. And about that language and culture, we can say also that a lot of also principal and teachers say that there is a sort of impreparation of school to support students in dealing with cultural difference and developing intercultural competence. This is something that could be improved, how we say. Something more I can add, we say now the limited to access to the education for an accompanied minor, the risk of living, and something about connectedness, because it's very interesting to talk about that. We also observe a sort of disconnection between schools and family, also because it's very important for the school to speak with the families and also to collect their educational point of view with them. So there is a problem, there is something that has to be improved. Also the fragmentation of networks, the prevalence of the intra-ethnic peer relationship, that it was also another good point. And just to finish to the well-being, we observe a lot of negative feelings from children, about the school experience, but also the frustration, of course, of pandemic situation. Now we are collecting also data and best practices, so you can find after May on our website the reports about the collection of good practices. Just to say that now we are trying to collect more than 60 good practices in Europe in these 6 countries with this kind of criteria: efficacy, efficiency, reproducibility, and political relevance. So these are the good practices that we want to collect and also spread in our website and the hub that I present. And let me finish to give you some highlight about the challenge of the Italian case that we would like to underline. So we see that the access to rights for this kind of for the minors with a migrant background has affected by a high degree of description. So we need for a more comprehensive, simplified system, mostly for all of us, of course, but mostly for children that are at risk of social exclusion, and migrant children are one of them. We say the segregation, so the access of school for migrant students must be ameliorated and avoid, of course, the form of segregation, white flag. Regarding the educational approach and practices, we saw that are heterogeneous and not often mature in terms of fully intercultural and multilingual approach. So also the multilingualism approach is very important to say, and the challenge is, of course, to standardize without losing flexibility. Another point that for IMAT product, but of course for Save the Children is very important, is the participation of minors and the importance of agency of children, also between them, also not native and together with the other minors with a migrant background. We also underline that the political and cultural hostile climate, of course, reverberate down to the level of interaction, trust, participation of the public participation. So it's increasing also the personal discomfort of migrant children. So there is, as Professor said, the urgency of investing in race cultural awareness, because culture is a common goal, as she said. And policies so has to be improving. So we would like to underline and finish and conclude. We would like to say that we have to consider the multidimensionality of for children is very important, that also for the poverty, educational poverty, but also for the integration process is very important, and to consider their situation in and outside the school. We also would like to underline that the dimension of educational achievement and language and culture are very important, but also we have to stress to the fact that are equally important the interconnectedness and well-being of migrant children. We have to enhance a multi-stakeholder, interdisciplinary and collaborative approach to ensure high level of intervention. We also recommend to promote the experimentation of innovative approach of intercultural education based on the adoption of integrated, empowering, inclusive approach. That's important, where migrant minors are the agents of the work community, because they have been involved in that. And also at the end, and we are very glad to participate in this floor with another project, it's important to transfer the knowledge and sharing best practices, and also sharing our result of research in order to engage each other, and to disseminate the results and the importance of this kind of problem and challenge. So thank you. This is the reference of the project. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you to Silvia Taviani. A very interesting, lively, and rich presentation. And now we, under the suggestion also of my colleague Alba Angelucci, we would ask to the participants if there are some questions or some very quick question and answer before giving floor to the next group of interventions. Otherwise, we will have a final discussion as it is planned, in which we can globally discuss all the issues that are proposed by the speakers. So maybe if there are some very quick questions that need maybe a clarification from the speakers, we can get them now. Otherwise, we give the speech to the other speakers. Okay, so silence is clear for in this sense, and yeah, we can so open the next step of the presentation after the keynote, and in a space in which we will give space to social workers and teachers, and also to people that work on the field from local government and from the professions that are involved in the integration of migrants, such as psychologists, and in general, all the care professions that are involved in this field. So we welcome Isa Polat and Tatiana Bagashuk from Kiel, from both the university and the local government of the region. And we give to them a floor. As my colleague Chris told us, they will share the presentation, isn't it?
Yes, and yeah, but again, greetings again to thank you for coming, Professor Polat and Mrs. Bagachuk. You can share the screen, right? I have already introduced. Let me know if it's okay if I introduce you once more again, or you want to start, or Vittorio, how do you want to go about it? Like beginning right away, or?
We can give to them floor right away, and then they can themselves they want, so they have more.
Of course, yes.
Okay, hello everybody. I hope that you can hear me well. I'm glad that we can share our experiences and our point of views to this relevant topic of schooling of students with a refugee background with you, to share our views and to have an exchange with you. Thank you for inviting us. My part will be to give you a brief overview about the German school system, and it's a critical point of view which I have to the German school system, and Tatiana Bagachuk is working at a special at a school with a regional vocational training for students with a refugee background, and she will give you an overview about her work and experiences. So I think it's a good, these two point of views are a good addition. And I will start, and like I said, it's a critical point of view I have, and because this topic, educational attainment of students with a migrant or refugee background, is a topic which I am highly sensitive since many years, and I'm reading about this topic since many years. So I'm, to be honest, a little bit frustrated that I still have to point out that we don't really have an inclusive system still. We are, I mean, and at many places, I can see that there is a hard working on it to be inclusive, but there is still a lack concerning this topic. So I will start with the topic migration and integration as a meta-narrative in German discussion. Then I will point out some scales, some graphics and numbers to educational inequality in Germany. And then I will say a few words to this topic, doing inequality and what is important to undoing inequality in the school system. And I will start with these meta narratives of migration and integration. Like you all know, Germany is a migration society. It is a migration society since the migration of the so-called guest workers was starting from Italy, then from Greece, Turkey, and Yugoslavia, and you all know that. So it's, you know, it's this topic, migration integration is not a new topic for Germany. Even in the 90s, Germany has to receive or has to integrate, if you want to say that, many people from the post-Soviet Union, for example. So dealing with a high number of students with a different background, with a different language background is not a new topic for the German system, for the German school system. But still, everything okay? You can hear me still? Yeah, can you hear me still? Okay. But still, this term migration and integration often is used to explain social problems. You know, it's more of the perspective of a problem. So we don't really, if you observe the political discussion, it's not quite clear what integration really means, and the people have often different meanings of integration in this discussion, political discussion, or in the systems like the education system. But it's anyway, and it has got a normative effect on the discussion. And I mean, the term integration is normative. I hope you can understand that the discussion is quite normative. It has a bias. This is what I want to say. So the bias is that it is often used in a form of failed integration. So failed integration of students with a different background is often the reference. And so mainly there are negative narratives and negative stereotypes about the failed, missed, or even impossible integration of immigrants and their children. So therefore, the studies, especially in the 80s and 90s, were studies often about the deficits, the lacks of integration of children with a migrant background. There we can find now some studies who are, the question of these studies is, in what way is migration or immigrants are described in the textbooks of students at schools, and the textbook students are using at schools in different subjects. So, for example, in social studies or in history textbooks, or also in textbooks of the subject geography. And there's just a quote from an interesting study which was conducted in 2015. And the study shows that in the textbooks analyzed, the problematization of migration prevails over the depiction of diversity as a normal case. In social studies and history textbooks, and to some extent also in geography textbooks, migration is primarily portrayed as conflict-prone and crisis-ridden. So the opportunity to practice a differentiated, reflective, and conscious use of certain terms is not sufficiently pursued in textbooks. So this is important. In what way children at school are dealing with this, in what way they have contact with this topic. And so this is in terms of what kind of perspective images they are developing. So really highly important in what way migration is described in books. So in Germany, if you are seriously conducting research about educational inequality, you don't really deal with the question if educational inequality exists. You are more dealing with the question how this kind of social inequality at the school system or in the school system is reproduced through education, and in what way it is reproduced in this system. So it's not the question if, so in what way. There are many studies, international studies, for example, the OECD study, which you will all well know, I'm sure. So, and the main result, and really important result of these international studies, is that the school system in Germany, that especially in Germany and a little bit also in Austria, there is a close connection between social origin, so the social background of students, and their educational success, and that the occupational status of the parents or the educational status of the parents has often been a main reason or is mainly a reason for the educational success of the students. And one of the main reasons which I have to point out here for the educational inequality in Germany is that there is a really quite early selection of the students after 4 classes. So after the 4th class, the students are divided in different school forms. And so we have a highly selective school system in Germany, which where you can find children who are 10 or 11 years in different school forms after 4 years of primary school. So there is gymnasium. This is the school where you can get the highest degree. Then we have this Gesamtschule comprehensive school. This is really an exceptional form. This is the comprehensive school is a school form which many European countries have normally, but it's in Germany it's more it's a little bit this exceptional school form. It's not. It's a regular school. It's a normal school, but the number of schools, comprehensive schools, is compared with gymnasium, for example, less. So, but in Schleswig-Holstein, where we are working, where my colleague Tatjana Bagashuk is and me are working, we have a different situations. In Germany, you know that it's a federal school system. It's a federal educational system. So the different regions have also, like Schleswig-Holstein or Niedersachsen or Bavaria, they have a little bit slightly different educational systems. But and what is special for Schleswig-Holstein is maybe because it's close to the northern part of Europe, maybe it's close to the Scandinavian countries. You can find, for example, in Kiel, many comprehensive school forms. So in Niedersachsen, for example, the number of Gesamtschule as comprehensive inclusive school forms is not so high if you compare it with Schleswig-Holstein. Realschule is the middle school, and you can receive there a degree, a middle school degree, after 10 years. And the lowest school form is Hauptschule, and there you can get the normal high school degree after 9 years, or sometimes after 10 years. But it's the lowest degree, so your options after the high school degree, after Hauptschule degree, you can make a vocational training, and there are some, of course, there are some, some professions where you can make a vocational training, but your options are not so wide. And so it's normally students try to receive at least the Realschul degree, a middle school degree. Okay, so it's what is important that the selection starts after 4 years of primary school. And what is in this inclusive system of Gesamtschule, as you can imagine, it's more easy. It's for the students to change the school form. So you have these 3 forms in one school, and the possibility and the chances for students to change from Hauptschule to Realschule or from Realschule to Gymnasium it's easier on this comprehensive school than if it's not comprehensive. So I don't know if you can understand it, because it's a little bit unique in Germany, these kind of selective schools. Now I have just some figures concerning the graduations of students with foreign nationality and with a German nationality. It's just comparing, and these are data from 2020. What is important here is that the number of students with a foreign nationality who have just the high school degree, Hauptschulabschluss, the lowest one, which I mentioned before, the percentage is about 31. And the number of students with a middle degree after 10 years is slightly like 37%. And if you look at the number of students who can receive, you can achieve Abitur, the highest graduation form where you can start studying, is by students with a foreign nationality at about 15%, and students with German nationality about 37%. So this is a huge difference, a discrepancy that you can see here, and what is also a problem is if you're not able to achieve any degree. So if you have no graduation, and there we can see that students with a foreign nationality, that there are about 18% without a graduation. So, and if you don't have a graduation, the vocational training system, Tatiana, I'm sure can tell you something about, is if you don't have a graduation, it's quite hard for you to receive something, or I mean, there are some alternative ways, but the way is harder and longer for you then. And this is a scale which is different from the other scale, is that here it's about the students with a migration background, and the scale before was students with a non-German nationality. And what is important here is that the difference is here between students with a migration background and without a migration background is not so big, like the difference if you compare it with the difference where you look at the nationality of the students. So there is a kind of, you can see there's a slightly improvement concerning the educational attainment of students if they were born in Germany but they have parents with a migration or foreign background. So the number of years students are living in Germany, or the fact if they are born in Germany is of course important for this point also. Yeah, we are discussing, I'm sure that we will speak about inclusive systems, and we will speak about diversity also. And we have heard in the presentation of Silvia Taviani that like intercultural competencies and schools who are dealing with intercultural competencies. This is in all societies where we have to deal with high diversity, and especially you can schools has to deal with this topic of diversity, and not just only because of the background of the students. Diversity means also, you know, what kind of constitution students have. So that also can mean, are they in a way disabled, or do they have any other needs? So schools have to react to these needs, and has to react to the special and different and individual conditions of students. But the system is still, and the people and the students, the teachers who have working in this school system are still in a way not really good compared to this diversity, to this highly diverse class. So during the education, during the qualification of teachers, the topic of how to teach a diverse class and how to teach in an inclusive form is still, I mean, there are some modules at some universities who are where students can learn something about diversity and teaching in diverse classes, but it's more, you know, it's they can elect these kind of models, but they don't have to study these topics if they don't want to. So it's not, they can do it, but they don't have to do it. So this is a difference. And if they are completed their qualification, if they are teachers and can work at schools, teachers, if you ask them, so how do you deal with this topic? So they often will answer you, yeah, it's hard, it's complicated, and it's challenging, and I often don't really know what to do, or what kind of method I should maybe use to teach in these special classes. Sometimes they also tell you, I don't have really the right materials maybe to work with these diverse classes. But I mean, it's possible for them, you know, to even if they are ready with their qualification, if they have finished their own qualification, I mean, they can attend courses to these how to teach diverse classes. I mean, they can participate in these kind of after their qualification, but they don't really do it so often, in my observation, because there's a lack of time for them. I mean, it's, you know, they don't have really so much time to do these kind of you know, on top of their work, to do these kind of additional qualifications. So then you will see that there is still the fear of multiplicity and difference, which is obviously perceived as disorder, grows, and with it's a desire for homogenization and separation. So the wish to separate students after 4 classes and to have these 3 different forms of schools, like Gymnasium, Hauptschule, Realschule, is also dealing, it's in a way, it's also a way to deal with diversity. And if you ask me, it's not a dealing, it's, you know, it's avoiding, if you ask me, to deal with diversity, because it's still challenging, and teachers are not really, not every teacher, but they're mainly not really, are not quite prepared for this job. But the personality of teachers, the qualification of teachers, and their perspectives on diversity and a diverse class is quite important also if you speak about educational inequality. And there's an interesting study, and I want to quote something about of this study. And the main sentence is, teachers treat students with a migrant background and low social background differently than their classmates. One explanation for unequal treatment is stereotypical assumptions about what students of different backgrounds are able to do. Such expectations have a demonstrable impact on actual student performance. So, teachers are not free. I mean, why should they? They're human beings, so they have their stereotypes. They have a bias, and they have different ways of dealing with students where they are not really sure what kind of culture or religion these students have, or what is the situation in the families of the students, and what kind of how different is their language. So what is important to take into account, you know, if you deal with the students. So if there's so many questions and you don't have the opportunities to answer these questions and to be well prepared to these questions, so you have to, you know, stereotypes and a bias can help to you know, to deal with your everyday life at school. It's a form of dealing with challenges. So but it's even if it makes it easier for you to work with children, it's can have a huge impact on the chances of the students to achieve good or not so good grades. Now I want to point out, and just have just 2 minutes and then I'm finished with my part. I just want to point out an approach, a perspective, which is from my point of view quite important, and we are discussing here from a critical perspective of pedagogy in Germany, and it's called Migrationspädagogik. We don't really have a good English word for it, so I want to say Migrationspädagogik. And what is important in this approach, in this special form of pedagogy, is it includes a critical perspective on nation building and boundary making practices, and but also marking in everyday life practices. And it is an approach which is aiming to overcome hegemonial knowledges and concepts of nation, ethnicity, and it is also an approach which is, you know, asking for a self-critical examination of one's own involvement in the production of inequality. And this is what I meant to question your own stereotypes and to question your own what I am expectations. And so to ask what and when and in what form are students restricted in their possibilities for action or to develop themselves, and which processes of the formation of the identity of students are taking place under the conditions of restriction and discrimination at schools, for example. And in what way it is possible for teachers and for actors in the educational system to change restrictive and discriminatory forms and structures in school systems. So that means the group we are speaking about, the children and the students with an immigrant and refugee background, it's a highly heterogeneous group, as you all know. So they have different starting points, and it's important that, you know, that we don't see them as a homogeneous group and homogeneous mass. So they have different starting points, and so we have to, if you are conducting projects to help them, so you have to see the different starting points also. And schools, especially the teachers, need to be more focused on the diversity of students and their conditions, and not the diversity of the student backgrounds is the problem, because the problems, It's more the routines at schools and systems, also in a society, the perceptions of migration in the society and self-images, which is important and which is characteristic the situation in the educational system. So it's important that, you know, teachers are dealing with processes of anti-bias approaches, and that is, but if they have to deal with this, they have to be well prepared for their jobs and schools, which are getting more and more diverse. They can only be successful if they get the appropriate support, the professional and also the personal support. Thank you for my part. And now, Mrs. Bagachuk will continue, sorry, with her experiences from the practice. Frau Bagachuk, Sie können weitermachen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, or how we say it in the north of Germany, Moin. Exactly. And this is the first step to integration, I would say, to know how it is in north of Germany, how they speak about it. To my person, I am by myself with the migration underground. I am in Germany since 20 years, and I'm from Russia, and made this way to be here. And Ms. Pollard said about variety of education system in Germany, and she spoke about these different kind of school in Germany, and we have another kind of school. It's this regional vocational training center, and these centers, we have these centers everywhere in Germany, and the students have possibility to make their on one side school degrees, the first degree, the second degree as a middle degree, and Abitur. On another side, they make the second part of apprenticeship here, so of vocational training. And we have on RWZ am Schützenpark in Kiel, we have many offers of making these degrees. First, it's AVSH, it's vocational training year, where the students, and many of them are refugees, for example, in last time, they have possibility to make the first degree, the first German degree, and this with this degree they can start this vocational training, and then they have AVSH, they have possibility to improve German knowledges, and we have some students who are from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Eritrea, or from Senegal. And for example, we have some students from Afghanistan who didn't or who don't have any knowledges in writing and in speaking in native language. So they have never been at school in Afghanistan, for example, and then they come to Germany, and they must go to school and make some degree. And this is, of course, a big problem for them. And most of the problems our students face are, you can see it, so it's this insufficient knowledge of German language, and it's the first step for integration, I think, and the first step to be integrative in society. And the second problem is that they have traumatic experiences, and they have problem with this traumatic experience when they are at school, and then they can't sleep well, for example, and then they can't come to school at 7:30 a.m. the first hour, and then our students have difference in cultures. So Ms. Pollitt said about this percent of middle degree and the first degree and Abitur, the highest degree that German or migration students can make. And I can say, based on my experience, that the difference in cultures is one of the points of this difference between this percent, because for many students with migration background, is very important to have something, some job or some vocational degree to work, to bring money home, to bring money to family. And many parents with the migration and background said to the children, come on, first start with the apprenticeship, and then you have something, and then perhaps later you can go to the university and make or you can study. So I think it's the first point between, as a for this difference between middle degree and Abitur. And then we have a little or complete lack of knowledge of the German education system. And this is for the people with a migration background, is very difficult to understand this variety of offers in educational system in Germany. And in Schleswig-Holstein or in Kiel, we have only these Gesamtschulen or these compare schools, and then we have these regional vocational training centers. So the students have only two possibilities to make the degree at these two art of schools. But in the in Niedersachsen or in Baden-Württemberg, so in south of Germany, we have more type of schools. Exactly that Ms. Pollitt said, Realschule, Hauptschule, Gesamtschule, Gymnasium, and then these vocational training centers too. So for teachers from these type of schools, sometimes is difficult to understand what the students can do of these centers too. So this, yeah, it's the problem. Exactly, and the next one, please. But I can say about school when I'm working, and we have measures to support refugees at our school, or to support not only refugees but the people with migration background. And the first one is these German lessons. So they have German lesson normally at school, and then after school they have possibility to go every day to these German lessons or to German remedial lessons. And many of the students that I work there, so I can say that many of students that I have at classes are vocational, so these students that who make vocational training, and they try to improve German skills or German language during these lessons, and they have this possibility. Then the second support that the people with migration background and refugees have is the close cooperation with career guides or guidance service of the employment agency. We have this Bundesagentur für Arbeit, and this career guide is every week here at school, and he can speak with the people or with the students who have some questions or some problems or would like to make some vocational training or are looking for a praxis, for example, and he can help them. And then job center for young people is the second one cooperation partner in the school or in my school. And then we have close cooperation with welcome guides. It's a project of Havika, I don't know how it is in English. It's the colleagues.
Chamber of Crafts. You mean the Chamber of Handwerkskammer?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a Chamber of Crafts. Yeah.
Okay, Chamber of Crafts. So it's a project of Chamber of Crafts, and they are welcome guides who are working, who are helping refugees in first line, and who are looking for some companies who would like to take refugees or who are willing to offer the refugees of an internship of training. And it's project or it's work when the colleagues are working very individual. So they are looking for, they are working with every, I don't know how can, it's one-to-one working. So they don't make this generalization. So we have some places, we have some free places, and you can take this one. No, they are looking for something special for these men or for these women or for these students. So I think it's very important to make this individual supporting and advising. And this is, I think it's a main point of successful integration. I think it's yeah. And then the last one support is this low threshold offers. So we have really on RBZ Schützenpark, we have many offers for people with migration background or for refugees, and we have, for example, I can see this as example. I have a student who made or who is from Afghanistan, and he have never been at school there, and then he came to Germany for 5 years, and he made here his first degree, Hauptschulabschluss, and then he started with vocational training. And now this year he will finish it. And I hope he will do it. And yeah, he has all the time some support from teachers, from career guides for me, and the last page of this presentation, the refugees need more time. It's very important. More time and individual support. Individual support is very important. And one consideration, I spoke before I made this presentation, or before I take part of this presentation. I spoke with some teachers, with some colleagues of mine, and one of them told me that one consideration is to create a type of course where the students are picked up from there, from where there's a need. So it's very important to know what they need. There must be no generalization. It must be very individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to everybody for the presentation. Very important to have different point of views from many angles that compose this big and important picture of education for refugees in Europe. And now I think there is a very good connection with the last presentation, because we host Vittoria Ardino. She's from Italy. She's president of the Italian Society of Traumatic Stress Studies. And she is really an expert on the psychological and biographical difficulties that refugees face in their journey from their country of origin to Europe. So, and then I just tell you that we will have one more intervention from Greece, and then we will have the space for discussion that I think will be needed, because we really have listened to a lot of different methodological works, and we will need to discuss something. I think we'll have some questions already from our partners. So now floor to Vittoria Ardino, President of the Italian Society of Traumatic Stress Studies. Please, Vittoria, you can present.
Thank you, Vittoria, and thank you for this opportunity to be here with you today. In my presentation, I will try to go over a bit about the consequences in terms of my expertise in psychological trauma related to migration, and with a special focus on unaccompanied children. And also I will try then toward the end of the presentation to link up those issues to the importance of developing trauma-informed schools, how these unresolved and very often extreme traumatic experiences have an impact on learning, and how this new emerging paradigm, at least in psychotraumatology, of the trauma-sensitive schools could implement a continuity of care with the health and social care system. Just one second that I'm sharing my screen. So as Vittorio said, I'm a president of the Italian Society and of Traumatic Stress Studies, and since last year I'm also teaching trauma psychology at the University of Urbino, where emergency and trauma psychology. Let's start to think about this title, about the title of post-traumatic syndromes. Very often in the field of trauma, when we think about post-traumatic reactions, most of the professionals are somehow familiar with what we call PTSD. But when we address the impact of trauma on unaccompanied children, we need to move a little bit beyond this concept of PTSD, because the traumatic exposure of those children is much more complex, and the array of reactions are very often more subtle and more complicated to be understood than just the classical cluster of symptoms like avoidance, the re-experiencing symptoms of the extreme variations of arousal and the physiological states that are the core of the simple PTSD. So we need to move a little bit away from trauma equal PTSD if we wanted to understand the impact of this experience of those children. Wanted to focus straight away on the fact that migration and immigration could be and certainly is a stressor, but could also be a strength if the system of care somehow is capable of working on the strength part. Certainly, immigration and migration is embedded and goes together with an adjustment process. That if reflect on this as applied specifically to unaccompanied children, then we need to bring into the picture also the attachment system, because sometimes also when I do consultancy work with communities or in other situations, that of course there is the trauma of migration very often. These are parents, friends, siblings, which are real important fracture for the attachment system. Also, we tend into the sometimes accompanied children not only decide to leave their own country of origin because of better opportunities or because they are in a zone of conflict and war, which is one of the issues, but very often they had already experienced the trauma within the family system. So when they leave their country of origin, they already are traumatized children because of what happened in their family environment. And this adds up to the cumulative effects of we need to consider to better understand the impact of trauma on those children, all these forces. And of course, we are talking about a vulnerable baby. That yet they are also very resilient, but we do need to foster resilience to consider all those aspects. So in pre-migration, as I've already mentioned, we do have very often some issues that are related to potential traumatization. When I say potential, the word potential is really crucial, because that is another big mistake that in the field of trauma is very often made, to consider, even in very severe exposures, like in accompanied children, to consider this automatic equation. If we are exposed to severe events, we are automatically traumatized. And if we do stay in this very rigid relationship between cause and effect, then there is no space when we think about interventions about strength protective factors and resilience, as I said before. Having said that, here we have the clusters of risks and exposures toward a potential extreme traumatization. So abandonment, gang violence, abuse and neglect, as I said, separation and grief, and historical trauma. Historical here means also the collective, the community of origin had been already traumatized for quite a few years. So this is also another word called collective trauma, which adds up to the rest. And then, of course, as we all know, there are potential issues of trauma related to migration during the transit, during the journeys, deprivation, injuries, abuse, absence, as I've just said, of attachment figures. And then we have what happened during resettlement. Now, the health and social care system of the host country plays the most important game here during resettlement, because I wanted to anticipate what I'm going to say a bit later. If we wanted to adopt a so-called trauma-informed approach, that doesn't mean that we are looking for trauma everywhere, but that the system of care is ready to avoid as much as possible further harm for those children. So further traumatization. And the resettlement period is a very, as we call, a sensitive time to set the stage of implementing resilience and to avoid the traumatization. And then also during the post-migration. So just to give you that we are facing here, as we see in the slide, a trajectory of potential cumulative trauma. And in terms of, I put it here PTSD, but I meant trauma-related disorders. Here we have somehow the percentages. And so what the data are saying to us that post-traumatic syndromes or trauma-related disorders are indeed an issue within this population. If you consider that in the normative sample, the prevalence of trauma-related disorders is around 6 and 9%, depending on the countries. Of course, if we think about where there is a war, is higher. But so you can very quickly see that we do have an issue. 53% of resettled and unaccompanied children do have some form of traumatization. And here we see some of the symptoms: avoidance, numbing, hyperarousal, that are persistent over time because also of the cultural differences. Very often the system is not so ready to detect the signs of traumatization that children display through certain behaviors. Also, we do have an issue with depression, with anxiety. But what for me it's important that as a message that I would like to share with you today, as I've just said, of course we do have those symptoms, but sometimes there is a misreading of some sort of distress or difficulties that those children are showing to us, and it's difficult for the professionals to link up those difficulties to an effect of trauma, like somatization and chronic pain, for example. And it's also linked to non-Western culture, that's where emotional words, but not so used to describe distress. And they move the effect of trauma on the body. Having said that, this is a phenomenon that is somehow universal. Many traumatized people do not put into words their distress, and they shift it to some form of somatizations. And this is a crucial point, because if those somatizations are not well understood and linked up to some sort of traumatizations, then what does it follow? It follows that maybe we have hospitalizations and medications without really this core issue of this type of problem. So what is the meaning of that chronic headache? Why that teenager wanted to stay all day in bed and not being involved in any activities, is very reluctant to learn a new language. It seems very lazy, but sometimes that is an expression of trauma. We do also have somehow suicide sometimes. And also we have another issue here, the traumatic brain injury, that sometimes the injury, the neurological injury, can mimic some of the post-traumatic reactions. And we don't have the time to go through this, but very recently in a center for women victims of violence, this young girl did have this problem. Where is the overlapping between post-traumatic symptoms and the issue of the injuries that they unfortunately are a consequence sometimes of very extreme torture? And we do need to address this as well. And then, of course, the role of culture. We need to interpret how children display their traumatization through their cultural framework. That is another aspect which is sometimes very complicated. Another issue is the stigma. The stigma that is very often still too much associated with mental health in general, and the fear of being labeled crazy. This is this applied even more for trauma, because the post-traumatic reactions in all cultures are very are not under control. Traumatized people think that they just live in a chaos. They are just very different from any other human being in the world, because they are overwhelmed by those reactions. They can't understand where they come from. And this is especially true then when there is also a different understanding of trauma depending on the culture. I'm going through very quickly here because I already said that we do have different potential exposures depending on the time. Just to consider that when we talk about trauma, there is the so-called cumulative effect. So all the pre-migration, then migration, and then what happened during the resettlement. If the trauma is not detected, then the effect is going to be expanded because there is a piling up of reactions. And we are talking about today also about children, as I said, that we can't consider the effect of trauma on unaccompanied children without talking about attachment. So we are talking about children that very often did not have the care that is necessary for normal psychological development. And here, as questions of time, but I can leave the slide for later. So in terms of detecting the effects of trauma, we need to consider that trauma is also age dependent. So depending on the age, we are going to see different behaviors. Infants and toddlers, that is severe separation distress, crying and clanging, sleeping problems, eating problems. And then We move to young children with bedwetting, acting younger, losing new skills, separation anxieties, and also repetitive play that shows trauma themes. And here we are getting closer to the likely age that we encounter when we are in contact with unaccompanied children at the school age, most often adolescents, that can show, because they have a greater exposure to trauma, and also a better understanding of situation and future implications, they can display aggression and anger, behavior that puts them at risk, disturbing thoughts, depression, very difficult time in terms of concentration at school. The difficulties at school are not just related to the adjustment to the new country, is also a direct consequence of their trauma. And also these children and the unaccompanied minor bring with them also trauma that is perpetrated across the generations. If we think about countries where there is political violence, genocide that implies the fragmentation of their community, or very often the rupture of the family. And so on the accompanied child, there is the baggage of this trauma that is perpetrated across the generations. We can see this very easily, for example, in Palestinian children, or we are going to see that in Syrian. Every time that there is a country, we see that, for example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, exactly this picture. So we do have a double impact over identity: traumatic stress plus immigrant stress. Okay, so what are the common traumatic reactions? Now, we are getting very close to the core, because, of course, the reactions to this complexity, they display complexity. But we do know that the traumatic reactions, when the trauma is not overcome, depends on a very specific mechanism that we call it the system of trauma. Basically, a traumatized individual is traumatized because after a time of danger or threat, which is a traumatic event, physiologically is becoming less and less able to return to the state of calmness and to the feeling of being again in a safe place. Traumatized individuals do not have the chance to experience this safe place. And so they tend to act to what happens around them as if that danger and threat they experienced during the trauma is representing as if again in the present moment, even if is not the case. So the survival mode is perfectly adaptive phylogenetically when we do have to face a real danger. But if that becomes a generalized response to our everyday life, then this is what it becomes like a trap for the individual, because it acts and lives as if the world was constantly dangerous. And that this has a very important implications for professionals who work with those children, not only psychologists and psychotherapists, everyone, because of this fear and because of the rupture of trust, they will always test at the very beginning, and sometimes for quite a long time, their relationship with teachers, with psychologists, with social workers, with educators, because they need to know whether they can trust that adult. And then we do have also the ambivalent loss of unaccompanied minors, because very often when they think about their family members, they are psychologically present, but physically absent. This is a paradox for such young individuals. And so very often, as you know, they present heightened anxiety, worry, sadness regarding the status of significant family members. And the impact, therefore, is very pervasive on the identity formation, friendships, and then sometimes associated with the developmental delays. And here is exactly what I was saying. The core point is here is the trauma system. With the amygdala, which is in our limbic system in our brain, undermines the possibility to those children to become emotionally aware. And so the survival modes regulate it all. That means that you see sometimes even in the school system behaviors that are somehow not coherent with the present moment. But in that case, when we see the behavior, it's probably because those children switched into a survival mode with the fight, with flight, or sometimes even freezing. So they are not present. Maybe when sometimes there is the teacher that explains, they look up, they are not physically present. Maybe they are going to a freezing mode because part of the traumatic experience just came suddenly into their minds. And also because the survival circuits can only get regulated by safe and healthy relationships. And here we go back to the issue of attachment. I don't know, I also put some vignettes, but probably I'm running out of time. Vittorio, how much time do I have left?
Yes, Vittoria, I think that in 3-4 minutes you should close, because then we also have another intervention from Greece, maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say then that in this case, in terms on a multidisciplinary vision, the common effort of professionals is to create a safe place for those children. A safe place means psychologically and physically, to facilitate the regaining of sense of safety. And so, as I said, it's very important that all together we achieve a trauma-informed systemic vision of care, which is, as I said, not just for psychologists, it's for all the professionals working with these children. Adopting this vision doesn't mean, as I said, that we need to look for trauma everywhere. It's exactly the opposite, but we need to be in the condition to detect the link between certain behavior and a potential traumatization. And I'm just going very quickly to give you just the 2 things about trauma-informed schools. So why are schools addressing trauma? Because those children are very often a survival mode. And this has an impact on school safety and culture and on their learning. So when there is traumatic stress, the possibility to learn just goes down. We do have quite a few issues. And just I wanted to give you this final thing, then if there are questions, we can go back to this point. So kids who experience trauma are not trying to push the buttons. They fear very much unpredictability, so they are always worried about what's going to happen next. If the situation does not appear to be too so bad for us is how the child feels that matters. Also, trauma isn't always associated with violence, it's also associated with loss. Fifth point, which is for me very important, we don't need to know exactly what caused the trauma to be able to help. With the specific strategies that we see in the point 8, even in the classroom, we can implement strategies embedded in the curriculum to foster self-regulation, to diminish the post-traumatic triggers and to maintain the sense of safety. It's possible those children within the window of tolerance, which is the optimum arousal zone, because it's only when they are there that they can actually learn. If they are either in night arousal or in hyperarousal, there is no space to learn. Okay, I have many other things to say, but I don't want to over time. I'm here so we can maybe go back later.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. It is very important for everybody here to have a better understanding of the psychological functioning of our, for example, people that come in our schools or in our social services, because that's the first step, I think, to overcome all the difficulties that we face. Because if we have a better understanding, a deeper understanding about how we function, how we feel and experiment reality, we can find out better strategies to cope with the challenges of migration. So now we welcome from Greece the last speakers of the afternoon that will present an experience of integration through technical and technological capacitation of refugees. And so I give the floor to them to present themselves and also to present their project. I think you are able to present and also to speak.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Good, good, good. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen as well. I hope you can see my screen too. Yeah. I just also want to make sure that I can see you all.
Yes, we can see it.
Good. I just don't see anyone. All right, okay. Okay, so very interesting things were shared in the previous presentations. We just wanted to share our experience implementing a project a bit more practically, so not much slides to go over. This is just the name of our project, integration, yeah, it's not going to be too long, so I'll keep it short. So over the summer, a friend of mine and myself who work in the tech industry as software engineers sort of thought that we would want to be putting together a learning community, and we've had experience being part of a learning community that was mainly for refugees, and it was open also, so whoever thought that they didn't have a chance to go to university to learn how to program, to learn how to code and make websites and web applications, they would be able to join those learning sessions and attend, and then slowly we would see that people would start to get jobs and would start to get projects to work on, and they would go from having nothing to do and having all that traumatic and like tough past that you all were talking about before, and they would turn their lives around and they would start to have income and they would start to have a career And so we, as soon as we were able to get back in person after the COVID restrictions were a little bit removed, we put together a course, and we started with about 10 students. And we went in basically the camps and the NGOs that we knew. And we were like, we know that there are people here that are talented, that are that have studied back in their countries. And if you know anyone, just let them know about our community. And all of a sudden, without much to do on our end, we had like 10 of them come knock our door. And they've been ever since attending the project or attending the classes and learning how to code. And taking a little bit of action on their end to make sure that they integrate into society, and not just integrate, but like actually thrive also in a, what is it, like really, really good paying industry. And so we know this is like not for everyone, but there are people that are like actually really talented or like technically gifted, or they've even studied back in their countries a year or two. And we just know that if we give them a laptop and a space with internet and say like, hey, this room, you can come here and study, they would be able to do amazing things. And this is what's happening right now as we speak. We actually have a class going on right now, and we'll be jumping in the class after we finish this call. And so, yeah, it's that. I've had this experience myself, having like a traumatized childhood a little bit, and having to quit school and not be able to get into university. But then when I learned how to make applications, I found job opportunities like coming after me in projects that more project than I can actually do. And so we found this little bit, how do you say, like unusual way to get people to find jobs without actually having a degree or anything like that. And so, yeah, this is pretty much what we do. Theodoros, is there anything you want to add?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Abed. So, along with Abed and Sohail, the two young refugees, they came with this idea of returning back to the community what they have earned, and to create their own solutions to the problems that many young refugees face in Greece. And one of these is access to qualitative education. So a partnership of the organizations was created to support this pilot project. One is Echo 100 Plus, the other is Common Ground, and the third is Human Rights 360, which I represent. With this initiative, what we wanted to make sure is that everyone puts the expertise that has. So Abed and Sohail, they are one of the tutors, and they are leading the educational project, the educational program, but they have also several professionals and that volunteer to the project, and they are coming as guests to this 3-month programming educational program. The rest of the organizations, we are offering our experience and practice to support people to daily life things that hinder education, such as giving hardware, access to internet, tickets for transportation, also the necessary means to promote the project and make sure that it's a future sustainability. We also ensured that all students will have a secure environment and a space that really will feel welcomed, and they will have time and private space in order to study, because even this is not granted. And lastly, we are trying now to not only to stick to just the educational part, but to create pathways for securing internships and future employment, and learn all the students how to do it by themselves and not be dependent from any organization, but to become at the end autonomous. So this is our perspective of integration by not giving only on a passive, not giving services and things to people, but to empowering them and enabling them to become autonomous and secure their sustainable and quality and a life with quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Theo, and thank you, Abed, for your intervention, for your experience. Victoria, do you want to take the floor and say something, or maybe we can open the floor to question and answer?
The second one, Alba, yes.
Okay.
We still have half an hour scheduled.
Yes.
So, after this long afternoon of presentation with a lot of experiences, I will kindly ask to all the participants to stay with us so that we can share ideas and some questions. We can get some questions from the audience if they want to the speakers, or even debate between themselves. It's an open space.
Yes, maybe I can take advantage of my position just to start with thank you, or to say a big thank you to all of our speakers, because their interventions were very inspiring and really interesting, I think. And then I also wanted to point out two themes that I think that have emerged transversally from the intervention. And the first one is more on a theoretical level, we could say, and is that diversity as a resource or as a threat. And this theme, I think, is very much linked to all of that debate that relates with the intimate globalization, which is the coexistence of parallel, multi-layered, transversal, transnational, hybrid symbolic universes within the same community, but also within the same person, we could say, in this case, when it comes to migrants, when it comes to refugees, and most of all when it comes to minors, to minor refugees, which have even more complex symbolic universes of references. And I think that we should reflect a little bit on this. The second point is more practical, and I think that it has to do with the necessity, with the needs of an intersectional training, I would say, for teaching staff. It's not just the training and the learning of the pupils, of the minors, of the refugee minors, or the migrant or minority pupils, but it is also a matter of staff, of to have, it's important to have a prepared staff able to deal with increasingly complex realities, increasingly complex experiences, life experiences, because as one of our speakers said, these people, they are minors, but they are not young, we could say the things in these terms. They have a big, an enormous luggage of experience, most of the time traumatic experience, and so the necessity to have prepared and trained staff which deals with this complexity is, I think, the main point. And it's also, I think, that is transversal, even if maybe educational system can be also slightly different from a country to another, but probably this point is transversal when it comes to this kind of target, minority or refugee minors and so on. So I just mute myself in this moment, and I just open the floor to your comments, your suggestions, your answers, and I hope that our speakers will be available for some insights on their contributions. You can also raise your hand with the dedicated button at the bottom of your screen. So okay, we have Yiannis and Chris. Let's start with Yiannis with the hand raised.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much to all the presenters. They were actually very high quality presentations covering a vast spectrum of themes towards refugee education. There are two things that actually I want to point out from the presentations and ask accordingly anyone who would like to answer. The first thing is that it was the diversity into diversity was stressed. So the individuality of refugee cases and the distinctiveness of ethnic populations or single cases of refugee children and adolescents was pointed out on the one hand. And on the other hand, the personality of the teachers. And probably as we pedagogists would say, their individual instructional pedagogical theories or their own values. Now, one of the themes of our project is the acquaintance of refugee children with European values and the European way of life. So I'm asking, in view of these three issues, the diversity, the European values, and the personality of the teachers, I'm asking the presenters, what are the, how do they see what is the importance of addressing European values or the European way of life, and how could this be without I wouldn't say insulting, but repressing or alienating refugee children and adolescents in the process of inclusion in the education system. We could gather all the questions and then answer. We could do it individually, whatever you want.
Yes, I think so. Maybe we can just gather the question. So the second one is Chris. Which is not here in this moment. So maybe we can just pass to Gul. Hello, Gul, maybe.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, thanks everyone to very nice presentations. I wanted to ask a question to Professor Polat. We know that the profile of refugees is changing in Germany as well as in any other European countries. They are not always coming from the low socioeconomic status. They are not always low skilled. Sometimes they are intellectuals, academics, journalists, that they are coming from their, how can I say, oppressed conditions in their countries. According to you, and their children, as well as other refugee groups, are frequenting the German or other, in the other European context, other schools. Do you think that that changing profile of refugees will change also the understanding of refugees and consequently the status of refugees in the schools or migrants in general in the German educational system? Thank you.
Chris has come back, so maybe he can just go on with his question.
Okay, pardon, I just had to take some water. Now I have, I hope we can manage to discuss that in the remaining time. There's a content question to Mrs. Silvia Taviani, and I hope I'm pronouncing the names correct on the presentation, and a commentary question to the speaker with Mrs. Vittoria Ardino with the post-traumatic syndromes. So I would like to ask Mrs. Taviani about, I mean, as a social researcher for you, let's say, or your team, what was the biggest, I remember you mentioned challenges, possibilities, or limitations in your presentation, but I would like to ask for you or your team, I don't know if you can speak about that, or if you feel representative of doing that. What was the biggest frictions you encountered, like frictions or challenges or even conflicts while doing fieldwork research? Perhaps this is a very stressful, I don't know, ethnographer type of question, because I'm on the field, or let's say the so-called like field research on, you know, handling, you know, the theoretical, let's say, lexicon, and then what happens in practice, or the so-called field. So yeah, if you can rephrase according to your opinion, of course, in your experience, like the biggest, I don't know, challenges or frictions or conflicts that you encountered during this. I remember it was a huge Horizon project, so I can imagine, yeah, like one of the biggest problems and friction you faced during this project. And the second question to sorry, I have to see the name, to Mrs. Ardino, I hope I'm pronouncing it okay. Like, based on the presentation by I mean, I think the narrative was sort of no, based on your presentation, I wanted to ask you if you think, because that's what I understood, like children's or refugee children's reactions are really, or could we label them as cultural specific, if that's your, I don't know, narrative or a main point, or if they can be seen rather as situation specific? Because I mean, I don't know, also Heights, if you want to drop on this one, because it is on this direction that with critical social work or anti-discrimination work, it's, I think, the opposite direction that we're working in critical social work with, you know, refugees and so on. So, okay, the first question to, I hope this is not like too much of a big of a question. Let me know if you want some rearrangements on the question. Thank you. Who would like to begin?
If it's okay for you all, I would like to start, because as I have realized and as I have understand the first two questions were pointing out some topics I have mentioned. So Yiannis Roussakis has asked the question, so what kind of goals and what kind of strategy to include, to conduct an inclusive pedagogy at the schools, and we are aware of not to assimilate, to have not a pressure, not to have a pressure on the students, and not to be assimilate. So it's a way of integration which is with a dominant culture. So, and as I have understood you, is that you want to be aware of these kinds of attitudes and not to conduct these kind of perspectives on the migrants and the refugees and their families. And I would say maybe it's always good for experts and for practitioners at schools, and also especially for teachers and for social workers. So what are the goals of our educational system? And I would say, I hope that you all agree with me that I would say it's quite important that the students are, that they gain a self-confidence, that they have a recognition of their own skills, that they are able to participate, that they have a will to participate, that they develop, a will to be part of the society. And if you, as a teacher, as a social worker, and we are able to give them the feeling that they, that we recognize their competencies, that we recognize their culture, and that we also recognize their languages, that they're, that's a huge, that it is a value to speak another language, not just the language of the country they are now living. So, and I would say, this is why I point out the negative frames and negative pictures on migrants and refugees, because there's a lack of recognition of that, what the students are bringing with them, and that also a lack of recognition of the competences of the family members. I mean, we don't really have this dialogue on the same level, I would say. The families with a refugee background, and also the families who are living in Germany since many, many years, they often have the feeling that they're still guests in Germany, that they're still guests in the society. And if they, so I think you can understand that it makes a difference if you have the feeling that you're a guest, or if you are a full member in the society. And so, and I would say, if we start with, recognizing the competences, if we start to recognize that it's a high value for a society to be multilingual, it's a high value for society, to be aware of so many religions, and to be aware of the, the freedom of speech and the democratic values. So we don't have, I don't see really a problem if, from my observations, from my, I have worked before, for my position as a professor, I have worked as a commissioner for integration in a city of Germany. So I had really a close contacts also to refugees and to social workers. Therefore, I hope that you can understand that I really know what I'm speaking about. So the people are really happy if they are able to participate. And if they have, in any way, the students and their parents, if they do have in any way a feeling to be part of the system, the school system, the political system, especially if they can be part of the neighborhood, for example. So I think this is really important, not just in Germany, also in many other European countries, we still have a negative narrative about refugees and immigrants. And if the political discussion is highlighted in a negative way, you know, it's really hard for refugees to develop a feeling of not to be just a guest, a full member, and to invent something, and to support. I mean, they are willing to support their children, I'm sure. So I have to make a point now, but I hope that, Yiannis, you could understand what could be, from my point of view, quite important. And Gül, you have asked that, that the group of refugees and immigrants, it's really a diverse group, and they're getting more and more diverse. I would agree with you. And as I have, you mentioned that if the group is getting more diverse, so I don't know if I understood you correct, then could the dealing with this group also change in the future? Is it right? Did I get you?
Yes, that was my question. Yes.
And I mean, it's not so optimistic, but I would say, the group of immigrants and the group of refugees, they have always been quite diverse. From my perspective and from my observation, they have always been quite diverse. And what I see is, we still have some problems in recognizing this diversity among the migration population and among the refugee population. And, it's a typical Western perspective. And I share, at this point, I share the critical perspectives of Edward Said, and I know that he has always spoken about the West and the rest. And I think we have to get in distance, and we have to, be more critical with our perspective on other cultures. So it is easier to see them in a homogeneous group, but they have never been homogeneous. So it's more of, do the West or the Western countries, are they prepared, and do they want to see these differences or not, is maybe the question. Thank you.
Maybe Silvia, we can't hear you. We can hear you. I don't know. I'm not able to hear. Do you?
Can you hear me now?
Now, yes. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I changed my microphone. And some few words, just it's very complex to simplify the project and the urgency, as the colleagues ask me, because on my approach, I'm a lawyer, I'm a policy an advocacy expert, so I have this kind of approach of the complexity and the governance point of view. So probably for that, I underline more the problem about the discrepancy about the legislation and the actualization of the right and practices. So if I have to say, like Save the Children, we can say that the first problem is the access to the rights, and is different between unaccompanied minors to the new generation. So we have two differences between this kind of a target, of course, but we firstly have a problem of access to the right. First of them, their citizenship, but also the right to be here, and also the legal status and so on. So this is the first problem, of course, in Italy. And second one, after they access to their also to the educational system, they are more at risk of social exclusion. They are mostly in the double of the risk of dropout, and this is not acceptable. So we can say just one word, but during the last 2 years, we had some cases in our field that migrant children left the school. They didn't have the laptop or the devices to access to their school during the pandemic. So it's just an example to say they are more at risk of exclusion, in the sense of the sense also of awareness about the context, their citizenship, in the sense of identity in the field that we have. So probably there are so many problems I can choose, but there is our point of view. Yes, I hope to reply.
Non hai microfono, Alba.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to give the floor to Professor Adino, but I need to ask you to be very short because we are running out of time. So just if you can just take your answer, answer into 5-7 minutes. Thank you. Victoria?
First, I needed to...
sorry, Victoria, just put a point. We continue tomorrow. So, of course, tomorrow we'll have another session. So we'll also have time tomorrow if we want to continue the discussion. It's open to everyone to join and to continue.
Exactly.
I just wanted to clarify if I understood exactly the question, because the connection was not so good for me. Chris, you asked whether I consider post-traumatic reactions to be culture specific or situation specific. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Well, both, in a sense that when we talk about post-traumatic syndromes, there are certain aspects that are present in all cultures. And when I refer to that, I mean the physiological responses. There are many theories and data suggesting this, like, for example, the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges that explains quite well how the nervous system is impacted by trauma regardless of the culture. The issue is, and this comes to the culture specific, is how we express the symptoms and our reactions that is very culture bounded. So in other words, if I had avoidance symptoms and a friend from Africa, for example, had exactly the same symptoms, in terms of post-traumatic reaction is still avoidance symptoms, but probably the way we express that reaction will be different, because that depends on the culture. I was quick.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, all of you. We are perfectly on time, but unfortunately we have to go to now. But we have also, as Victoria said, the tomorrow session. So I hope to see at least most of you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Italian and German time, 10 o'clock Greek time. So see you tomorrow, hopefully, and have a nice evening, have a nice night.
Okay, grazie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Devo fermare io la registrazione, giusto?
Sì.
Okay. Interrompi, ho fatto, però non so se vada. O forse devo fare prima in pausa. Non so. Non mi dà la... Ok. Metti in pausa, resta la registrazione. Ecco. Ah, ok, vuoi interrompere la